Welcome to our attendees today. I'm Emily, and I am the front office assistant and the development coordinator for TurningPoint. So I just want to go ahead and welcome everyone. I wanted to let you all know that the ones that are live today, you all can ask questions to Lisa about her presentation today in the chat box, in the Q&A, whatever you're comfortable with, and she can answer those for you. But before I turn it over to Lisa, TurningPoint is a 501c3 nonprofit that depends on community support. So on the next slide, there are a few of our socially responsible partners.
Let me get to it. There we go.
Did it switch?
Did it switch?
I didn't for me.
Oh. Now?
I see it now.
Okay, is it there?
Yes. Yes, it's perfect now.
Oh, technology.
So now well, I can go ahead and hand it over to you, Lisa. So these are all of our socially responsible partners. We'll go ahead and have Lisa begin.
Okay, all right. Good morning, everybody. Close to afternoon. And as usual, thank you for joining us. And today we're going to talk about something in my eye. But today we're going to talk about just summertime favorites and how to but how to be healthier, make healthier choices as we're heading out to grill. I realize that, I usually like to do this presentation. I apologize. I usually like to do this presentation in at the beginning of summer and spring. But I actually, since with COVID and everything, I completely forgot about us all grilling and having a great time outside. So I'm like, we need to talk about this. So the biggest thing that we talk about, and when I think of summer, I think of my childhood summers, and I think of a lot of, family gatherings and picnics and barbecues. And so when I was little, I had no idea about any of this stuff. But as I grew older and into my profession and reading more about cancer and cancer prevention, some of these things were like eye-opening to me. So we're going to start off with just grilling, okay? And that's really basically what my whole topic is going to be about. I have a couple of recipes at the end. I will send them to Emily if you guys want those recipes, and we can distribute those. But I get all of my information, just so you guys, I think I've said this before, but from the American Institute for Cancer Research. So basically, I went. I love their websites. They're straight and to the point. They have like 4-minute reads on this stuff. So a lot of this information basically did come from them. So American Institute for Cancer Research, and here we go. These are just about the grilling. Okay, so what the research says, we all know, and we all know that we all love to grill. Okay, and grilling, especially grilling meats, can increase our risk for cancers. Okay, I apologize for that typo in there, but meat in general, whether that be red meat or the white meat, and we'll talk about that as well. The meat cooked at high temperatures, and that is like grilling, creates a cancer-causing substance, and these are big words. Okay, they're called polycystic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, or the heterocyclic amines, or HCAs. These carbons are been known and proven that they can cause a little change in our DNA structure that can lead to cancer. So, I never knew this when I was growing up, and it's interesting, and very interesting is the fact that I remember grilling out, and I used to love to burn the meats on the grill. I used to love burnt hot dogs. My sister and I would burn them. Anyway, so live and learn. But so this risk of these carcinogens are formed with these higher in the red meat population than our white meat. So let's talk about the red meat and what red meat is. And red meat, I tell people, all my patients, red meat is basically anything that doesn't cluck or swim. So beef, pork, lamb, venison, veal. People are always questioning me about, pork being a red meat. The marketing on that is fantastic. It is a white colored meat, so that's why they said pork is the other white meat, but it falls under the red meat category. All right, so we know all of those, and then we know the processed meats like hamburgers and hot dogs and sausages. So those risks are higher. These HCAs have a potential form higher amounts in these types of meats rather than your chicken. That though they do form in chicken, but contribute to these PAHs and these HCAs. So we're gonna talk about 5 things that we can do to decrease our exposure to these HCAs. Okay, so first of all, the meat that we do choose is important, and I want you to always keep in the guidelines of red meat consumption from the American Institute for Cancer Research, okay? And they want us to keep our red meat consumption between 12 and 18 ounces of cooked meat, and that is in a week's period of time, okay? So, you know, generally they used to say 18, now it's like 12 to 18. So, you know, this recommendation keeps getting less and less as the years go on. So I just always tell my patients to be very cautious of red meat consumption. So if we really think about it, if we had 3-ounce portion, which 3-ounce portion of a cooked meat looks like the size of a deck of cards, okay? If we did that every day, you know, if we did that for 7 days, obviously we would be well over the budget. But so if we did 3 ounces, you know, 4 days a week, 6 days a week, we would be at that 18 ounces. So I always like to remember or remind people that that is a guideline and we need to try to adhere to that, because the research does show that a higher consumption of red meat does increase our chance, does have a link to colorectal cancer. And that's not only the red meat, but that is also those processed meats and sausages as well. And I know we're talking specifically about grilling, but those processed meats also do come in the form of our cold cuts, okay? So sliced turkey, salami, pastrami, all of those. They are considered processed meats. We need to get creative when we get on the grill. You know, throw in some more chicken and throw in some more fish, using herbs and spices and hot peppers, and we'll hit on a little bit of that. So the first step to decrease our exposure to these carcinogenic substances is to change up what we grill. Okay, so step 2 is very important, and this is really helpful as far as decreasing our exposure. So we want to marinate our meats, and the studies have shown that if we can marinate our meats for at least 30 minutes, marinating does have a big impact on reducing that formation of those HCAs, those heterocyclic amines. So look for a good marinade. Marinades can be, and we'll talk about this in a second, but they are helpful for many reasons. And one, they do decrease those HCAs. They do because they also, can reduce the cooking temperature. And so we're going to look at some of the things and how we can create these different marinades. Marinades, as we know, we like to marinate foods because it boosts the flavor for one. A lot of we want the cancer realm of everything. We want decreased consumption of saturated fats, okay? And saturated fats are those fats that are solid at room temperature. The saturated fats are those, like if you look at our meat period. So, you know, ribeye steaks are, you know, are very sought after, okay? People love ribeye steaks. And why do they? Because they're so moist. You know, people say they can cut them very easily, and that is because the marbling in them, and that marbling in them is the saturated fat. So when we look at lower saturated fat meats or very leaner cuts of meat, they tend to be drier on nature. So marinating those meats will incorporate some moisture. So marinating has, you know, a threefold benefit. So we're going to add flavor by marinating, and then we're going to add the moisture, but we are also going to decrease cooking time and decrease that exposure to the HCAs. Marinating, as we find it does create kind of that barrier, the meat between the meat and the heat, and the searing that we see on the meat, and that's what we're talking about when we're charring. But when we marinate that meat, the charring is more with the marinade than it is on the meat per se, okay? So that marinade is that barrier. So it does decrease our exposure. So the herbs and the spices that we add to that marinade not only add extra flavor, but they're adding all those antioxidant properties. So when we talk about anti-inflammatory foods, you know, one of the big things on there, the herbs and the spices, there's almost all of the herbs and spices anti-inflammatory. anti-inflammatory properties, but some of the heavy hitters are your garlic, are your turmeric, are your basil and oregano. Those are very high. And so those are types of things that we can add to our marinade. And that's an added bonus to protecting us from those cancer forming HCAs. So with marinades are normally made with an acid, so such as like a citric or a citrus fruit, or it could be a vinegar, it can be any type of vinegar. So there's the regular vinegar, there's red wine vinegar, you know, apple cider vinegar, rice wine vinegar. Those tend to be the ones that we marinate a lot with. Always there's a fat incorporated in there, so it's any type of oil. I always recommend using an olive oil that has the least amount of saturated fats. It has a higher amount of the monounsaturated fats, so olive oil is fantastic to do. You can marinate with a peanut oil. Peanut oil does have that flavor, so you will acquire some of that peanutty flavor in the marinades. But those are great when we're marinating, you know, seafoods type things like salmon is a great thing to marinate with a peanut oil or even a sesame oil. There's also some type of salt in a marinade. Any type will work, so we don't have to get, you know, all salt is salt. At the end of the day, you know, people ask me, is sea salt or kosher salt better than just regular straight up salt? At the end of the day, the sodium is the same. Okay, you can get volume wise, you know, different salts, the sodium chloride. So you would be able to use more, say, of a kosher salt than you would a table salt. But at the end of the day, it's 2,400 milligrams is really the high end of the normal. Right now, what we're recommending is to get no more than 15 milligrams of sodium in a day. So our salt that we use a little bit of salt added to a marinade. They are not part of the marinade process, but they do add the flavor. And do remember that the marinade, you're not going to cook and drink the marinade or use that marinade and eat it per se, but you will be rinsing that off and you will be discarding that. So don't be afraid of the salt at that point. And then we add the seasoning. So we add the herbs and the spices. Sometimes we add sugar. And like I said, that sugar and then the oils in that, we don't want it drenching in oil, but the sugar can create those char marks so that puts that barrier from the HCAs. So when we marinate, we generally put them in it, like this picture on here, a big storage bag or a big storage container. And really, the larger that bag, the better off they're going to be. I sometimes will make double the marinade and use a larger bag, because the more surface area that marinade covers on our protein, the more flavor it really gets into that meat then. So become creative, use the larger bags. If you don't want to use the bags, you can have glass container. I have the old metal bowls that I will marinate things in, and the key is to go in there and flip occasionally. Go in there and shake the bag around, or go in there and flip the meat around if it's in a container. 30 minutes is what we really like. Overnight is perfect, and overnight in the refrigerator. I just want to make that point clear. We're not going to overnight these and let them sit on a counter, because we want to keep, you know, the bacterial growth low. Sitting on the counter for 30 minutes if the meat stays out of that danger zone of 40 to 140. So if it doesn't drop below, you know, in that zone between 40 degrees and 140. So when we refrigerate things, or we have things that are really cold, they're obviously below 40. If we let them sit down on the counter for 30 minutes in the marinade, they should be fine. They shouldn't get too high into that danger zone. And we are going to cook them. So marinating is very important. It's very helpful for decreasing any risk for exposure to the HCAs or increased risk. Okay. Then we're going to, and a lot of people don't do this and find our chefs don't really like when we talk about this, but we're partially pre-cooking the meat. And why we do this is it really reduces the amount of the HCAs and the PHAs that are generated during cooking. And I left off a couple of words here, okay, and that are ingested. So you can microwave them first. I don't want you to microwave them to full completion, but microwave them like 75% done. And then you just throw them on. You can throw them on the grill. You have to remember a key note is that the longer that the food is exposed to, the higher, it's these higher temperatures, not lower temperatures, that create these HCAs and these PAHs. So a high temperature, this high heat, and generally when we think of these grills are at very high temperatures. So if our food is cooked almost to completion, 75%, and then we throw them on the grill, it will decrease our exposure to these carcinogens formation. Okay. Slow, we're gonna keep our heat very low. So we have to remember low and slow. So by pre-cooking a lot of these, then it will reduce our exposure. So over a very low flame or over a very low temperature. And how we do this, when we're cooking, generally, I remember back in the day when my dad would cook, he would have over the direct heat, and the juices and the fat from the meat that we would cook would drip down on the coals, and flames would come up. Those flames are not, we don't want that direct contact with our meat and the flame. Okay, so the flame and the meat, we don't want the direct contact, because that expedites and that exacerbates those formations of the HCAs and the PHAs. So we want to really put, when we're grilling, all of our heat source should be on the outside, the parameter of the grill, and we should put our meat in the center, or vice versa. But it makes more sense that if we have our heat around the parameter, that the meat in the center will be a consistent temperature. So we'll put the meat in the center. We don't want that over the direct heat, because we don't want the juices to fire off into flame, to cause that flame. Okay, so how we do this is that we keep, like when we have our marinades, when we generally, we take the marinade and we don't just drip it all onto the direct heat. Our marinades, generally we will marinate, and then we will shake most of that marinade off and then put that on the grill. Okay, by cutting the visible fat off any portions, a lot of the cuts of meat out there nowadays don't have a lot of visible fat as we used to back in the day. I remember pork chops used to have that thick piece of fat on the outside. I remember cutting that off, but any visible fat would be great to cut away. And that is even on the leaner cuts. If we're doing a big roast, we cook it mostly inside, but we cut a lot of that fat, because that fat will flare. It'll cause the flame to flare. And again, we're going to move those coals onto the outside of the grill, cook the meat on the inside. And then if you happen to get anything extra charred, just don't eat that charred part of the meat before we eat them. So we usually recommend you cutting that off, discarding. And I know that's like the best flavor. I used to love that part when I was little, until I learned more about it. So then we're going to do it low and slow. And then step 5 is basically what we're going to do is we're going to add some fruits and vegetables. And a lot of people are not really comfortable with cooking fruits, or don't know how, but basically you see here, these are charred marks. Grilling vegetables and fruit do not produce, they produce none of these HCAs or the PAHs. So we can become very creative in throwing all of these vegetables on. These vegetables also can be marinated if you want to do that. Vegetables on a grill, I generally like to brush down real lightly with some olive oil. You can season them then, you can season them after, but I think that the smoking of the grill or the flavor of the grill is enough a lot of the times. So lightly brush them. If you don't have enough room on your grills, there are things that you can buy. It's just kind of a little mesh, a netting, and you can throw it like for the fish. If you're too afraid that fish is very fragile, but if you want to do a lot of vegetables, you can do that. It will protect them from falling through the grids of the grill. So you can grill them like that. So adding the fruits and vegetables, if we backtrack and we go back by when I say that we need to decrease our consumption of the red meat, so to 12 to 18 ounces. So we can do that. But remember, with chicken and fish, these HCAs and the PHAs, these things form with protein sources. So any protein source that you're going to throw on, animal protein sources. I want to correct that because it doesn't form with, like if you threw tofu, for instance, on the grill, these do not form as well. So these are, I want to clarify, these are animal sources. So even fish and poultry will create those. So if we go back to our guidelines, I usually say, you know, we pick a day of the week that we have completely completely meatless. So we do a meatless Monday, for instance. So we can throw on, we can grill. We can do this. It's summertime. All the vegetables are fresh. Do nothing but on the grill except your vegetables. And then in the inside, we can have, you're preparing our kind of our alternative protein. And those can be, you know, we can get creative and we can have, you know, our quinoa, we can do farro, we can do all those different ancient grains. Grilled vegetables with that quinoa are phenomenal. And quinoa, if you've not played around with it, it is good. Some people are like, I don't like it at all, but I usually recommend when we steep it with a low sodium chicken broth. That's going to throw in some extra flavor. You can do it that way. And then any type of legume or bean. So we can throw lentils, we can simmer lentils the same. So we have grilled vegetables, the lentils, and the beans. So we have a complete, the color is there. We have a complete meal, complete protein sources without all the animal products that per se we're trying to avoid. All right, so we have those, we have that. So we want to that's the grilling part. And slide, I didn't have a slide. I wanted to talk, and I hit on the keeping the food safe out of the danger zone. And when I say the danger zone, we are talking about temperatures, keeping our food in a safe zone. And I said 40 to 140. So what that means is keeping our cold food at 40 degrees or less. All right, so things that we bring to a picnic, for instance, my aunt was from, you know, had the best potato salad ever. All right, so that's cold. So we need to keep that at below 40. We don't, and then our warmer foods, we need to keep at 140 or above. We need to keep them out of that range between 40 and 140, because that range is what we know is that the bacteria and microbes that temperature. Okay, so not keeping it over 30 minutes in that danger zone, the less exposure it is. So we become creative. You know, I remember, I don't know if a lot of you, I just do remember having family barbecues and everybody would bring these dishes and the food would just sit out there pretty much, I hate to admit this, but all day. Potato salad, egg salad, all of that. So, you know, nowadays we just have to be, you know, we know a little bit more versed in this. So, coolers, keeping food in coolers, obviously eating it, putting it back in the cooler. You can become, you know, you can put, I usually will layer, if I know I'm going to be outside for 30 minutes or more, I will have a plate that I will take a larger, like a 13 by 9 inch pan. I will fill it with water and I will freeze that. And then I will take that pan with the ice and set it on my serving area. And then these colder foods I will put on the ice packs for, you know, that's my homemade ice pack. I'll do that as we're serving. Once everybody is done, then I will pack stuff up and put it in the refrigerator. So one thing though, if we think about, or people ask me like, you know, what do we do if, like, it's even like at Thanksgiving, if leftovers sit in that danger zone and you're just uncertain. So what we do is we have to heat that food back up above the 140 and keep it there. You know, if it's a soup or a gravy or anything like that, we need to have it at boiling just to make sure that all the bacteria is killed. As far as the colder food, we need to refrigerate it. We need to keep it refrigerated for quite some time in order for those bacteria to stop the growth and to stop the harmful side effects of those. So it's really important that we keep those foods in out of that danger zone per se. Okay, so let's go down. I have a couple of recipes. Okay, and so these are just different things. This one is specific to chicken. You know, become creative when you're doing this. We can throw in anything. And the reason I like this one is that there are some that are our onions, our ginger, our garlic, jalapenos, those types, anytime that you can throw in a vegetable as part of your marinade, it's going to help. Okay. And the key thing, like, with chicken, we have to make sure that when we cook that, or we bake, we can bake this, or we can put this in the grill, but that our temperature of the chicken is in the right zone as well. And this should be, the internal temperature should be at 165 for chicken if we're cooking it. Okay. So that is one recipe that we can do for chicken. This one is just a herb Dijon. This one is actually from the American Institute for Cancer Research, and this is a basting. You can use this one. You can cut all sides. You can refrigerate this, turn and coat it. Make sure that you keep it in that casserole dish, like they're saying, to get the marinades. But again, if we look at this, we have the different anti-inflammatories that are in here. All of the herbs and spices, like I mentioned before, have any kind of fruits and vegetables have anti-inflammatory properties. So, so the more that we use, the more that we can, and more creative that we become. So this herb honey Dijon is great for anything. It can be used for chicken or pork. Pork is really good with the protein. If you're doing, if you're allowing, that, that is in within your 12 to 18 ounces budget. All right, so that's another recipe. And then we have another marinade that you can use. And the same thing, we're going to keep it, we're going to refrigerate it, we're going to grill it, marinate it for at least an hour, 30 minutes, at least an hour. Okay. The good thing about the marinades is that they add a lot of flavor, but they don't add a lot of calories per se. And like I said before, you're really not, once you marinate something, you generally do not consume that marinade. Some recipes, and you'll find them, and it's perfectly fine, but if you do have an extra marinade left over, I wouldn't say the yogurt per se, but like if you had the one prior, if you had the herb, the basting sauce, or the sesame one, I usually will say that if you take that marinade, if there's a lot left, you can put it on the stove and you can simmer it, bring it up to a boil. Like I had said, we're going to take it out of that zone, and that will kill any kind of microbes or bacteria that is in that. So we're going to simmer it or slow boil it for a little bit of time if you want to use that as a side dish. Some marinades will have you reduce the marinade down. Just be really careful. Again, make sure that you do that, and make sure that you do it long enough that you will kill any potential harmful bacteria from the chicken or from the beef. Okay, let's see. Wow, that's it. I guess I thought I had a little bit more than that as far as with the marinades and the seasonings. But if we go back, I just want to kind of reiterate some things. So just we're going to go back. So step one, we're going to mix it up. We're going to add in more things than just beef and pork. We're going to have the chicken and fish, but we also are going to remember that the chicken and the fish we need to watch those for the searing and the charring. We're going to marinate. We're going to marinate at least 30 minutes. Overnight would be ideal. And we're going to remember that the marinade, it does create the barrier between the heat. We're going to pre-cook on the inside in the microwave, or you can do it slightly in the oven. A lot of times, let's just go back with this one. A lot of times you can take that meat and you can wrap it in aluminum foil, low heat into the oven. When people do, I've seen it done with ribs when they have like their special occasion ribs. I've done this with chicken breast. And even if you do a whole chicken, if you do a chicken that you leave the skin on, we used to recommend back in the day to take the skin off because it decreases the amount of saturated fat. But what we have found is that if you leave the skin on and discard that before you eat it, it's perfect and safe. That skin will keep especially the chicken breast moister, a little bit more moist. So let's keep that on low heat, and then we're going to add the color in. So those are the 5 things I think that we want to remember as far as cooking and grilling out and marinating for the summer. So we can open it up for questions at this time, Emily, if anybody has. No, that's kind of quick and to the point.
Yeah, perfect. No, I loved it. Those recipes sound so good too for those
And I'll
marinades.
send them to you. I'll send them to
Okay,
you.
yeah, we can share them with anyone who wants them. We can send them to all the attendees today. But if y'all have any questions, please feel free to write them in the question box. Lisa can answer them for you while we're live. And this will be posted afterwards on YouTube. So if you want to go back and hear any of her steps and tips for the summer barbecue, you can definitely do so. Any questions? Thank you, Lisa, so much. That was
You're
awesome.
welcome. I went so fast. I'm sorry if I would talk too fast.
No, I
I had
felt
too
like
much coffee this morning.
no, it was perfect. But if anyone has any questions, you can
We have
definitely.
a take-home message. That's all. As long as we get the take-home message, that's really good for today.
Yes, that was good. Well, if no one has any questions, you can always reach out to us at the office and we can get any of your questions answered about Lisa's presentation today. Or you can email us at staff@myturningpoint.org too, if you ever want to reach out. But thank you guys all for joining us today. And this will be on all of our social media with YouTube and Facebook and everything. So follow us on all the social medias to stay in the loop and hear about Lisa's presentation next month. So Turning Point's committed to supporting the recovery of breast cancer patients through survivorship education. So please feel free to express your appreciation of this through a donation at myturningpoint.org if you feel called to. But thank you guys all for joining us, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your summer.
You guys, bye.